A few days ago, I recorded a one-off YouTube episode that I entitled Nagorno-Karabakh, a frozen conflict with a question mark. And I said that it is going to be a one-off episode because this is not really my analytical field or my area of expertise. There are many other experts who could say far more about the Southern Caucasus. However, I have worked on this area as well. As I said in my previous episode, I did a lot of research leading up to the late 1990s in a treatise that I submitted to the law department at the time when I was doing a one-year course on conflict resolution. And of course, as somebody who defines an Armenian ethnic identity, I'm interested in knowing what happens to an enclave that is so closely attached to the Republic of Armenia and that is caught up between two protagonists, Armenia on the one hand and Azerbaijan on the other. Another reason is because a couple of good friends of mine have basically egged me on to say something more, simply because since I recorded my last episode, things have not improved. The situation on the ground, the war that is being waged in that part of the world has actually deteriorated, and there are more casualties, more uncertainties, and therefore more peril for human lives and for the geopolitics of a tinderbox that, as the map behind me shows, does not only have Armenia and Azerbaijan there, but also Georgia, Turkey, and Iran, as well as the huge influence exerted by the Russian Federation. So let me first of all touch upon a sensitive point, which is history. Now, overall, I've always said that history is one determining factor. It is not the factor that defines any conflict. In law, we say that it has persuasive authority in defining a conflict. And if we look at the history of Nagorno-Karabakh, we actually cannot stop in 2020. We cannot stop in 1990. We cannot stop in 1988. We have to go back before the Common Era, somewhere around 150, 180 BCE, and then gradually walk forward until we get to 2020 CE, which is the Common Era this year. And if we just have a look at the history of this region over this vast stretch of time, and I'm no historian either, there are some brilliant historians on this region. If we look at this vast space of time, we can see that this enclave, this small parcel of land, has seen so many wars, and not only between Armenians and Azeris, but the Iranians and during the Safavid dynasty have had a say, the Turks have had a say, the Russians, as I will say in a minute, also had a determining say, and even we, the Brits, had our say round about the time of the Paris Conference of 1919 as to which way this parcel of land, this enclave, should go. But one determining factor, I believe, was the decision by Stalin in 1923 to grant this enclave, which was populated in its overwhelming majority by Armenians, to Azerbaijan. Now, why did he do that? He didn't necessarily do that because he loved Azeris and hated Armenians, or because he loved Azeris more than Armenians, or whatever. Use whichever formula you want to use in this context. He did it, in my opinion, and from what I also understand from my shallow reading of history, let me put it that way, is that Stalin wanted to leverage Turkish foreign policy to be more pro-communist. And therefore, this was one way of gaining favor with Turkey. Because remember, when I said 1919 and the Paris Conference, that was at the end of the First World War. Now, if we fast forward a little bit now, and it's no longer Stalin, but it is Putin that runs the Russian Federation post the independence of all those Soviet socialist republics, we can say that the president of Russia, a good chess player, also likes to play his cards carefully and see how he gains leverage in the geopolitics of any region, including the Southern Caucasus, which is not a million miles away from Russia and Moscow either. So in a sense, what I'm trying to say is that when we talk about history, when we talk about 180 BCE or 2020 CE, when we look at the way the turbulence and the changes that have taken place in this small parcel of land, when we talk about the trade-offs between, say, Nagorno-Karabakh on the one hand and Nakhichevan on the other, when we think about that little strip of land, Zanzegur, that literally is supposed to link Karabakh with Nakhichevan, when we talk about the fact that Stalin gave this oblast, this administrative Soviet region to Azerbaijan, when we bring up all this history, when we dredge up all this history, it should be a helpful component toward what we do now, not another reason to stir up more acrimony, more bitterness, and more jingoism. And for that, I would say that the present situation is dire. It's dire for Armenians, and it's dire for Azeris, it's dire for human life, and it's dire for the whole region. We get reports of wars and attacks everywhere. The capital of Nagorno-Karabakh, Stepanakert, is being attacked nightly. Areas that are controlled and inhabited by Azeris are also being attacked. There are some 78 towns round about the southern area with Iran that are, such as Fuzuli and others, that are also witnessing fights and being bombed. This, I mean, nobody in his or her right mind can say, oh yes, let's get on with it. At least nobody whose head is wired up the way mine is. Human life is sacred. And when I see what's happening for a conflict that has gone on for so long, I sort of say, yes, history, but what about humanity? And humanity brings me to the second subject, which is another one that's being talked about. When it was proven, not only by the West, not only by France, not only even by the United States, and certainly not only by the Armenians in Armenia or Nagorno-Karabakh, but even by the Novosti Russian news agency and others, that there definitely have been mercenaries that have been imported into the war front by Turkey from places like Syria and Libya to fight on the side of the Azeris, or at least to guard, to protect the oil regions there. And then they came and saw that the destination didn't match the purpose. This is a fact by many, many accredited sources. But then the counter argument that is being used is that, oh, well, there are Armenians from other parts of the world that are coming and fighting on the side of Armenians. Hold on. The Armenians that are coming from places, I don't know, whatever place you want to say. United States, there are loads of Armenians. France, there are loads of Armenians. Iran, there are many Armenians. No matter where they're coming from, these people share the same ethnic identity as the Armenians of the Republic and of the enclave. It's almost like saying Azeris should not come and support their Azeri brothers and sisters in this fight. The comparison, the analogy cannot, in my opinion, be made with Armenians coming to fight on the side of Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh, or Azeris coming and fighting on the side of Azerbaijan. We are talking about paid mercenaries who are coming, jihadists, some of them, who are coming to fight, and they're probably wreaking as much havoc as they're doing any good for the region. So for me, the comparison, the analogy, I'm sorry to say, is totally unacceptable and also unsustainable. Now, let me sort of try wrapping this up, because I'm not going to keep on droning on and on. Drones. They've played a big part in this war, and a lot of those drones, as we know, are Turkish made. Crisis Group, I've said in the past, is an organization that I respect a lot. They have come out with a briefing and they come out with recommendations about different zones of conflict. And they've done one on Nagorno-Karabakh as well. I will put a link in the box, in the description box, in case you'd like to read it, because I think that although sometimes I suggest that ICG, International Crisis Group, is a little bit romantic in its recommendations, given the populist and aggressive world where winner takes all prevails today, I think they are proposing a set of ideas that might help get us out of this quagmire that we are all in, particularly the Armenians and Azeris in the region. But what is needed is not war. It's that famous sentence of talk, talk, jaw, not war. And political diplomacy is necessary. And one of the things that alternative dispute resolution has taught me is that political diplomacy doesn't just come from heaven like a revelation, or else like manna falling from heaven. It needs building upon. And that building upon happens with confidence building measures, with CBMs. And how do the CBMs happen? The CBMs do not happen with more bellicose parties chipping into the conflict, stoking the fire, making the situation worse. It does not happen when, and I'm particular about this, when Turkey, lock, stock, and barrel, jumps in with Azerbaijan and against Armenia and Armenian designs and ups the ante of this war. I mean, President Erdogan is running amok. And now the Southern Caucasus seems to be one of his latest hobby horses. So in a sense, Azeris and Armenians and the world community, the OSCE Minsk group, they should come together in order to release a whole range of CBMs, get the two parties talking to each other, and find a way out of this war, out of this situation. Because at the end of the day, yes, territory defines a nation. Territory is sovereign, and we have different interpretations of whom that territory belongs to or how it should be administered. But at the end of the day, I do not think that territory necessarily cancels out humanity. And by humanity, I mean not only our human nature, but also our living nature. So I leave you with these thoughts. Thoughts about history being only one component in the conflict, thoughts about who are mercenaries and who are not, thoughts about what think tanks and organizations such as ICG could contribute, and most importantly, the political diplomacy and the CBMs that are necessary. And for all this to work, we need goodwill. And unfortunately, at this moment, in a world imbued with jingoism, goodwill is not abundant. I pray for peace and I strive for hope. Take care.